Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining today's webinar. And I know it's such a busy time of the year, so we're so excited that you're with us today. We're going to chat about GEO 101, a growth marketer's guide to winning AI search. My name is Amy Scanlon, and I am the GM of the affiliate practice here at Right Side Up. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Right Side Up, we're a collective of marketing specialists. We've helped over 1,000 companies hit their growth goals. We have expertise across all marketing functions, including performance, life cycle, SEO, creative, social. Those are just a few. We have many more. By designing the right strategies and deploying the right talent, anyone from freelancers to fractional leaders to FDEs to custom built agency teams, we empower companies of all stages and sizes to continue to hit their growth goals. So, enough about Right Side Up. That's not what we're here to talk about today. Let's cover a few housekeeping items, and then I want to introduce my guests here. So, all the participants in the webinar are muted except for the panelists. This will be a live panel discussion, and we really want to hear from you. So please add questions in the Q&A module throughout the webinar, and I'll ask these to my specialists on the call today. And lastly, this will be recorded and we will send it out tomorrow. So be on the lookout for in your inbox for the recording. All right, let's see who I have with me today. I am thrilled to be joined by some of the best marketing specialists in the Right Side Up Collective. We have Stephen Spiewak. We have Austin Fury and we have Kelly Chambers. And I'd love for you guys to all introduce yourself. Let's start with you, Stephen, and then we'll move to Kelly and Austin.
Greetings. Thanks for having me. Steven Spiewak here. I lead organic growth at Hallow, prayer meditation app, based here in Chicago. Uh, Deeply experienced in SEO and all of the related channels that you need in order to have success. And looking forward to the conversation today.
Thanks, Stephen. Kelly Chambers here. I'm a content strategist, consultant, and writer. I work mainly with fintech and tech companies. Spent the first 10 years of my career in regular finance. I was a CMO and CTO, and have worked with brands from Goldman Sachs to BlackRock and a lot of smaller startups as well. And now I usually work with 3 to 5 clients, helping them with their content strategy.
Hey everyone, Austin Fury. I've really been looking forward to this. This is something that I think about and read about and talk about all day, so it's fun to be with a group of like-minded people. I've been an in-house marketer. I was an in-house marketer for about 12 years, mostly in enterprise B2B for emerging technology companies. I've also spent some time on the agency side before. So I have an appreciation for, what kind of both sides of the vendor relationship looks like. For the past 5 years or so, I've been doing growth consulting with a few clients at a time. This year, earlier this year, I went full-time consulting, primarily in B2B growth, organic search, GEO, and all that good stuff. So yeah, this topic's been super fascinating to me, and so I'm happy to share any knowledge I have and what's working right now.
Awesome. I'm excited to ask you all a bunch of questions. I have so many. I made a list and I'm hoping that the audience has some too. Before we get started with some of those questions, let's kick off a poll. I'm so curious, are you thinking about including GEO in your growth strategy plans for 2026? It's always so fun when you get to see the poll moving and shaking. I'm sure you all have an opinion in what you think, so we'll just give it a few more seconds and we'll see if it's aligned with what you think will come in. Oh, wow. Okay. Exciting. Wow. All right. I will say the majority are a yes. There's some no, and there's some that aren't so sure. So this is fantastic. This is going to be such a great discussion because hopefully we can reinforce what you're thinking for 2026. And then for those of you that are a no, maybe you might sway towards GEO. And for those of you who aren't sure, great. We hopefully will bring back some ideas for you. Okay, cool. Let's start with, GEO, understanding its importance. I'd love to have the panelists here answer what is GEO in a few words. Who wants to take this one first?
I can go.
Great.
I just do a one sentence explanation, and I think it's the process of getting your brand cited and mentioned on AI platforms. And I'd add to help reach your business goals. You have FCO in the past, people would do that, but it wouldn't be tied to business goals, so you run into problems. So that's my one sentence explanation of what GEO is.
I love it. What about you, Austin and Stephen?
Yeah, really the internet in general, with it's been accelerating the past couple of years, but it's just becoming an increasingly summarized and personalized world. We have these popular, LLM chat products that help, bring us answers or solve problems or, entering really complex prompts that you wouldn't necessarily put into a traditional Google search or a Bing search. So yeah, you're optimizing for how you show up in the model, when you show up in the model, how it describes you. So traditional CEO is about, ranking higher for your preferred, key groups and terms. And GEO is about being a part of the answer or being the answer, when a certain query is entered. So I'm sure most, if not all, people on the call have had what they thought to be a pretty complex question and, put that into one of the popular LLM chat products. And yeah, I think that's what we've been finding is that just like traditional SEO, there's best practices and things you can do to be a little bit higher on those blue links. Same with GEO. There's things that you can do to help kind of craft, when and where you're mentioned.
Yeah, and just piggybacking off of what Austin said, the G is generative, right? And so traditional SEO, you are in complete control of your content and you want that content to rank, and then you're able to serve and deliver the exact content the way you want it, optimize the way you want it, and have the user receive that content the way that you've designed it. The generative piece, you're now in this space where you don't have complete control. And so you're optimizing to be a part of that generated response. And that's probably one of the biggest fundamental differences, is that you're no longer in total control of the content.
I love that. I am going to sound like an alarmist, but I often say we're really marketing and selling to machines these days with the rapid clip of adoption of AI. And so we just need to make adjustment for the machines. Why do you guys think that traditional SEO alone is no longer enough in the AI age that we're living in here?
Yeah, I can go again. I think it was touched on already. Consumer behavior is changing. 5 years ago, it was Google, right? Everyone went to Google. And then ChatGPT came along, and now there's many different tools. I don't know about everyone on the call, but I use a handful of tools and I'm testing new tools. So search is becoming fragmented. Also, Google search in and of itself is becoming GEO. You have AI overview. That has really crept up quickly. I think almost every search I do has an AI overview, and sometimes they're extremely long. So after your sponsored links and the AI overview, you're two scrolls down, you're organic. Um, so I think that the trends are just, going in the way of GEO. At the same time, SEO is still a very big thing. So don't drop the ball on that. You got to juggle both.
What do you think, Austin? Do you agree?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, SEO is still essential in many ways. It's, the foundation for GEO is having really good, SEO hygiene and best practices. But GEO is certainly a new distribution layer. It's certainly a different a new way to access the information. Gartner recently released some research that said that 9 out of 10 B2B buyers that are making like a technical purchase decision are using these LLM products to help them make a decision. So even though it may not show up directly in your attribution or show up directly in your analytics, people like myself are using this, constantly to summarize ideas, to consolidate features, to help understand like what's important to you, what's important to your organization. So I think as marketers and, as organization leaders, we're always measuring and optimizing for something. So to me, it kind of seems silly to not include, these types of optimizations just like you would when you're optimizing for, SEO or for click-through rate or through, scroll page depth or what have you. Like marketers love optimizing for things. And I think that, for some of the best practices that you can deploy, it's not really that hard, to include that into your, optimization set.
Yeah. Stephen,
Yeah, I think
anything to add?
yeah, I think it depends what your current SEO approach looks like and what your SEO program is. If your SEO program is someone locked in on keyword research and just living in a CMS all day and maybe doing some technical things, you're going to have to do a lot to get ready for GEO. If your SEO program is collaborative and your SEO knows what's happening on the community management front, if your SEO program interfaces with PR and brand, if your SEO program understands what's happening on social and collaborates with the social folks, you are in a good position to succeed in GEO. But right now, if SEO is like kind of off to the side of your other channels and not integrated and not collaborating with them, it's going to be a drastic change to compete in GEO.
That's such a nice segue. One of the things I think about a lot are what are some of the risks in failing to adapt to GEO, some of the most immediate risks, and what do you think some of the long-term risks are? Stephen, I'd love to get your thoughts there.
Yeah, so I think it's right now like immediate. It's different by industry. It's different by
Mhm.
demographic. Younger people are taking to these AI search platforms much more quickly than older people are. So depending on what your business is, like you could be seeing an impact now, you could not be seeing an impact now. But I think that the cat's out of the bag, and the trend is not going to reverse. People will continue to embrace and use AI search. And right now, it's probably for most people relative to Google traffic or search engine traffic, minuscule, but it's a trend that's growing and accelerating in a way that Austin talked about it before we hopped on. But not a whole lot of other channels are growing massively year over year as a whole, and kind of AI search is certainly an opportunity that is growing.
Oh my gosh, it's so true. And I think once you start to unpack some of the metrics that are coming out, particularly if you are a commerce or D2C business, just Adobe is putting together their Black Friday and Cyber Monday metrics, and the amount of assistance that AI gave in attributable revenue is meaningful and at such a large growth rate. What do you guys think, Austin and Kelly?
Yeah, this is a question that I answer a lot of just, what should we focus on? What are other people doing? What's working? Is this worth, investing in? Or, I think those are all fair questions. I think that a really simple litmus test is that if you're seeing referral traffic, through your analytics, or if you're seeing some pipeline or revenue, coming through from popular LLMs. I think likely the answer is yes, is that you should be optimizing for GEO because likely your competitors are too. Like we were just talking about, traffic from LLMs is growing super fast. And it's a different type of traffic where for clicking on the blue links in a traditional Google search, like you're kind of researching, you're kind of looking for answers. You might have a bunch of tabs open. You may not even be settled, you might be fairly top of funnel. You may not even be very settled on what you're looking for. LM traffic is a little bit different in that they've already had a lot of the answers served to them, and they weren't on your website looking for that answer. They're looking for, here's a bunch of parameters. I'm looking for these types of solutions. The web is going to be summarized and personalized and served to you, basically. So if you are seeing traffic, if you are seeing pipeline, if you are seeing revenue, even a little bit, I think it's definitely worth optimizing for. If the answer is no, I don't know if there's a huge risk to you. I mean, if you're in a vertical or a product that's not well suited, maybe there's just less technical buyers, or maybe it's just a lower threshold of a decision. Maybe it's not right for you, or maybe you need to get some of those measurement tools and dashboards and that sort of thing to in place to really even understand what the opportunity is for you. But I recently was doing some research for a client on just like what their audience tendencies were, where they hang out, what types of tools they use, and that sort of thing. And this was a niche like DevOps focused tool, so maybe it makes a little bit more sense for them. But the research showed that 70% of their audience, was AI search first. Using ChatGPT basically was their preference. Um, the next closest was Google, which was like in the teens or something like that. So some niches have a very high level of adoption. There's a ton of opportunity out there. And if you're not in that position, maybe there's other demand capture channels I would focus on first or invest in first. But if you are starting to see some traffic and some revenue, odds are your competitors are as well. And it's going to be up to you, and it's going to be up to them who takes advantage of kind of that new demand channel that you can capture.
For sure. Kelly, anything to add there?
Yeah, when it comes to short-term risk, I guess two real-world examples I could share. One client serving more high-end kind of retail space. It's a fintech client. We don't see a ton of traffic, but the traffic we do, they're very high-value clients. We saw this back in the day when iPhones came out or mobile apps came out in the financial world. Those early adopters were actually really high-value clients. So the type of person who's willing to buy something through a chat GPT conversation may be more higher value in the long run. Um, and then on the other side of things too, when it comes to attribution, it's very hard. We've talked about this a little bit already to kind of get the full picture of traffic. Another company I work with, we're able to see about 1% of the traffic is from LLMs, but through customer surveys, about 10% of paid conversions are. Now, take it with a grain of salt. It's a survey, but online data and analytics isn't perfect either. So that's a huge spread, 1% to 10%. So there's definitely business opportunity there. I think knowing your audience and knowing who you're serving is really important. But yeah, they're high value opportunity on these platforms for sure.
I think the
Yeah.
opportunity is also really interesting, right? Because like when you think about Google, and sure, it's much larger traffic referral than these AI search platforms, but there's also decades of Google understanding the layout of a SERP and who ranks where and what domain normally should go above another domain. And these AI platforms don't have that. There's not this long track record of, okay, this is the incumbent and we always, the algorithm always favors this site. Usually it ranks high. It's kind of like there's, I think, tremendous opportunity to move quickly and develop a presence that could be disproportionately high in the AI search landscape. So if you've been struggling on SEO, if you perhaps invest in GEO now, there could be an opportunity to like make a bigger impact more quickly than trying to crack the Google algorithm, which has been, long established and kind of longer track record of what the SERPs look like. So I think it's kind of an interesting like strike now opportunity and try to gain ground more quickly than perhaps you can on more traditional search.
Yeah.
That's the part that I love so much is that, whether you're an early stage company or a late stage company, it's kind of a level setting field right now. And there's some quick and early wins to be had, but you have to lean in. Which brings me to like, talking about leaning in, kind of planning and execution as you're thinking about GEO for 2026. It really starts with an audit, right? Establishing kind of how you show up, where you show up, if you're being represented the way you want to be represented, represent. Oh, we're just going to move on from that word. You know what I'm saying. I love it. Let's talk about like what are the most effective ways to conduct a GEO audit. And Kelly, let's start with you because I know you've done some recently.
Yeah, definitely. So this is a new thing for everyone. So you can do it manually, I'm sure. I've gravitated towards picking a tool. So for me, if I'm going to work with a company, I'd say let's pick a tool that you're comfortable with. There's a lot out there, and there's a lot more, it seems like, coming every day. So there's names you might hear like Profound, Goody, PKI, SEMrush. I like it. There's a tool called Meridian I've been using a lot lately. So find the tool that's going to work for you. Demo those tools. And then most of those tools, if they're set up properly, are going to help you audit different areas, which I think we'll get into around technical content and other areas. Um, around GEO. So for me, it's about finding the right tool that's going to work for your company, for your team, technology wise, and deliver the right data you need.
Yeah, and to your point, the selection is so high of tools, but there are lots of free trials out there too to start to explore and to determine what is best and integrated with your CMS, of course, pricing and so forth. So, Austin, what are your thoughts? Because I know you conduct audits as well. Where do you get started? How would one get started?
Yeah, so there's two main aspects to that what people are looking for from an audit, right? So there's like what's my status quo? Like where am I in relation to my topic or to my competitors? And there's some metrics that are becoming fairly standardized, across these 100 plus tools that have popped up, and then you have your legacy tools like your SEMrushes or Ahrefs, and they have built-in AI visibility features and that sort of thing. So some of these tools, and if you are already paying for one and you're already using it, in my personal opinion, there's not this huge distinction in between tools that people are using right now to measure some of this, basic stuff like your, you know, AI visibility score, which is oftentimes just a compiled metric that just shows like how much of the opportunity are you gathering of what's actually out there. There's the count of citations or the count of mentions. Like there's a ton of tools that can help you do that. Is where these tools, and where I think a lot of audits really kind of lack is just knowing exactly what to do about that. There's not a whole lot of, outside of like some best practices and outside of like some basic optimizations and some things that are kind of making the rounds and kind of making the circuit of what people suggest you to do. It's kind of hard to know, what to do after that. So I think that once you have that baseline understanding, which a bunch of tools can help you with some of these baseline metrics, okay, so you're going to have the understanding of your fourth out of 10 competitors and visibility. Maybe your visibility is a little bit lower than you'd like on this topic. I have 45 mentions. I'm not even really necessarily sure like how important that is or what that means. I think that, in terms of actually adding something to your audit that can be maybe a little bit more manual outside of a tool, but can be a little bit more actionable, is auditing your most important commercial terms and prompts. And some of these tools will kind of hold your hand through this of just what it, when someone is actually prompting with inside of an LLM, what do I care about when they enter and like what actually matters and moves the needle for my business? And then actually collecting, all of those referenced sources for where the LLM got that information. Maybe you're mentioned, that would be great. Maybe you're not, but the reality is like for a lot of these real-time prompts that the LLM is going and crawling some top results and like putting together a cohesive answer for you, that's something that you can actually understand a little bit better and impact a little bit more outside of kind of like the more tidy dashboards. So when we get into more of like the technical examples, I can kind of dig into that a little bit more. But to me, that's kind of the first step is just kind of getting whatever your tool choice is or whatever one you're already paying for, get a baseline down for what some of these metrics are for you. Because for a lot of them, they can't retroactively track. So whatever you put in today is what it's going to start tracking going forward. So even if this is not a December 2025 priority for you, but you think it might be a March 2026 priority, that is one thing that you can do that'll help you in your audit process when you're kind of, a couple months down the road trying to decide where I am right now in relation to my goals, and then what am I going to do about it? At least you'll have that first column, kind of the basics covered there.
I love that. And I would also add to not be afraid to try different tools. I mean, there, to your point, there are some basic metrics you can get out of the tools, but then there are other tools depending on how sophisticated or where you are in your company's life cycle, where you can actually start to input more data, like your brand data, your ICP data, and then start to drill down into your baseline by ICPs. But again, get started with a trial, get started with a free tool, try multiple tools, establish the baseline, and then go from there. And it's such a, it's such a nice way to come up with your phase one, phase two, phase three, phase four. And that brings me to what are the four components of a successful GEO framework? And Kelly, I'd love to hear your thoughts there.
Yeah, definitely. So the areas that I think a lot of us look at, it comes down to like you have the technical side, right? You have the content, which is a huge part of it. Third-party syndication is kind of a wing of content, but it's not the content you necessarily own, right? And then you have reporting at the end of the day. So how do you know if this is working and you're headed in the right direction? Um, Going back to the audit question, when I do an audit and the tool I use, the result of that audit is going to tell you within the tool, these are the changes you need to make on your website. You don't have the right FAQ schema set up. You don't have the right metadata in place, those sort of things. And then on the content side, um, if you think about it really around, in SEO, it's keywords and it's gone in the way that it's a little more broad with SEO in terms of like broad match type keywords and long tail stuff. But with content, I really think about it as topics, not prompts, not specific prompts. And within those topics, think about intent and context because all, four or five of us on this call, four of us could type in a different prompt, but if it has the same intent and context around a topic, we'll get a very similar answer. So think about um, when it comes to content, what are the topics that you want to kind of target? And then structuring that content in a way that is going to be accessible to LLMs. I like to use the inverted pyramid sort of style of content. You don't want to bury the lead. You want your most important things first. If you get too creative with your writing, it's not going to work well for getting cited. So we can talk more about kind of that. And then on the third party syndication side of things, it's really dependent on industry and your brand. I've done in the last 2 days 4 different audits, and for example, in financial services, things like NerdWallet and Bankrate were big third parties that were being cited at the top of the list. But in the tech space, it was Reddit, Medium, and YouTube. So understanding which third parties make sense for your brand. And then reporting, I know others have some experience around that too. So reporting is sort of specific to what you need for your company. But yeah, Steve and Austin, if you want to add anything, go for it.
Well, I'll amplify as my area that I work on is primarily third-party syndication. It's my favorite because it is, the offsite army of context creators that are telling the LLMs that you are exactly who you say you are. And so I love that you can use third parties to amplify your content strategy, but also fill in gaps in the subtopics and the subtopics. You can't possibly rank for everything. And so let your third parties assist there. So I love that part. And then in terms of reporting, with your tools, you can start to understand LLM citations and brand mentions down to the third party partner, be it an affiliate, a PR source, digital media publication, a subreddit, et cetera. And so I'm excited about the third party syndication, but only once you have your technical house in order and your content house in order, and then you give your marching orders to your third party partnerships. What I'd love to do is drill down into each of these areas. And so let's start with what's involved in each of the phases. Starting with the technical, Stephen, do you want to talk about when you're doing a technical audit, what do you focus on?
Yeah, so I think with a lot of these kind of frameworks, I think you'll see a lot of like similarities and foundations that are rooted in SEO, but are maybe slightly different for GEO. So very similar to SEO, like how easy is it to crawl your site? Do you have content hidden behind JavaScript, which LLMs are not going to execute, right? How are you structuring your website and your content? Structured data is really helpful for something that works in SEO, but is also equally important in GEO. you hear kind of like the concept of semantic triples and how you like actually structure wording and cosine similarity. But basically, it's like, to Kelly's point about writing and creative writing on your site, like write very clearly and like with great confidence and prioritize that writing on the top of your page. So, if you need to define something and you need to own a term and own a topic, make it very clear that you know what that topic is. And here's the reason why you know it, right? So, um, but yeah, I think it's, kind of very similar to a lot of like SEO foundations of making sure your site is crawlable. There are strong internal links. You're demonstrating topical authority. I think the jury's still out on kind of like LLM sitemaps. Google, I think, is kind of like going back and forth on does it make sense to have a file specifically for that. But if you're doing a lot of like the sound technical SEO frameworks, then I think you're gonna probably be fine for GEO for the most part.
Makes sense. How about you, Austin? Because I know you do quite a bit of technical audits.
Yeah, I think that something that might be helpful to folks, just as like a specific example of something that you can do this afternoon, just to kind of get a better, understanding of just kind of where you are and where you want to be, is, and this relates to technical, this relates a little bit to syndication, this relates a little bit to reporting, but and I mentioned it earlier, which is, doing a query fan out analysis. Which is what that means essentially is when someone asks an AI model a question. An example could be um, just like what's the top smartwatches available right now? Maybe they're looking to buy a gift, for Christmas or something like that. Is is what you can actually do is, and there's different ways to do this depending on which model you're using. You can look up, how to get the query fan out search model for a particular term. But it is what um, the LM is doing is it's basically making a quick search of the web to kind of get a consensus, and it doesn't search the way that you and I would. It's very snippet based. It's quickly retrieving, some top consensus answers from what it considers to be authoritative resources. But it's going to split whatever your prompt is. It's going to split that into several different queries, and you can actually look at the search models for what these queries are. So in the smartwatch example, this could be things like top smartwatches for 2025 would be the actual query that it's putting into Google or to Bing to look for some authoritative answers. Another alternative could be like it's also searching simultaneously for best smartwatch for fitness, um, Apple Watch versus Garmin. Like it'll make a bunch of searches that are related to your prompt, and then it fans them out to look for a consensus to summarize. So if you do this exercise, and again, there's depending on the platform, you can just kind of look up how to do this, depending on what product you're using. You can look at all of the URLs and you'll see what the LLM saw, which is the title, the URL, the meta description for those pages, and you can actually collect those pages and see which pages that it actually referenced. So depending on the type of, query, this could be 5, 10, 30 URLs. And then is what I like to do is I like to sort those into two primary buckets, which is the URLs that I can personally influence, and then the ones I can't. The ones that I can't influence, I'm not too worried about. But when we talk about like mentions, citations, and visibility, that's what we're talking about, is what percentage of those URLs that were referenced did you actually show up in? And so some examples of some things that you can influence in that one side of the spreadsheet is the pages that you own. So if the model references your content, but maybe it's a little thin or a little dated, that's a great optimization you can make. LLMs love, freshly updated content. Sometimes there's listicles and roundups around your particular topic. So maybe there's a Engadget article that says top 11 smartwatches, for the holiday season, that type of thing. And perhaps you can reach out and build a relationship or offer reciprocal inclusion into your own list that you're making. Um, and you'll probably, particularly in software, you'll see things like, directories or review hubs. Sometimes it just takes, getting a few more solid reviews to kind of break into that next level. So I think that like people with traditional SEO experience will kind of appreciate a query found out analysis a little bit because it's kind of where SEO meets GEO. LLMs aren't search engines. They're not static indexes. They're constantly scanning for authoritative, concise answers, in real time. From your perspective as the person prompting, it just looks like a second or a half a second or maybe a couple seconds, but that's all happening behind the scenes when you make a prompt. So I think if you can understand for your top commercial prompts that would potentially recommend your product, if you can understand the query fan out results and how you fit into them or how you could fit into them, that kind of helps you stay in the game and helps you optimize for something that is more concrete. And that's where all of the other tactics, kind of play into it because I kind of see those as tiebreakers. But in order to actually get in the game, you have to be in that, kind of family of URLs that's being referenced, in order to get that answer.
Oh my God, I so love that. You don't know what you don't know. And so now you just ha gave us so many insights on what you can do once you understand the URLs. I feel like Kelly, you are probably, your wheels are turning on content strategies and recruitment and activation of partnerships where you're missing. What do you think in terms of the phases for content and syndication and tracking and measuring?
Yeah, I'd second everything Austin said in terms of identifying those opportunities. And like the audit tools will help you do that. Find the topics and then the prompts that you need that you have opportunities for or that you're already being successful with. The other thing too, when it comes to syndication, how it actually I think starts with your brand or take your homepage. The language you use will likely dictate how the outside world will speak about you. So I have a client, for example, can't say who they are, but they use very specific language and then they get reviewed by third-party YouTubers who speak about them in a way because they speak about themselves in a certain way. And if they didn't do that, the third-party YouTuber would use different language potentially. Take email marketing and CRM. There's some huge overlap there. Two totally different words though. So do you want to show up for CRM prompts or email marketing prompts? You have to think about that nuance in terms of your brand language. It sort of starts there, and how the world is going to talk about you and where you fit into those conversations and those prompts. Um, and then the other thing, I think, identifying where you have, to Austin's point, actual opportunity to take action with third party. Depending on your industry, if there's not a lot of regulation, maybe you can get much more heavily involved in Reddit. In less regulated industries, I've seen Reddit being by far the number one citation and brand mentioned source for companies. So, but knowing what's going to make sense for your industry. In the financial industry, Reddit's very hard to play in. So you have to kind of know what works for you there. Um, yeah, so I think you know, finding the opportunities like Austin said, and then when you build that content out, I think the one thing I would add, we've talked a lot about structured content, making it easy for the LLMs to crawl and read and make sense of. The one thing I'd add though is it has to be unique even more than ever. SEO, you used to be able to get away with not the most unique content sometimes. It's gotten better in terms of quality. Um, but I think incorporating your own research and actual data that the LLM can't get anywhere else, refreshing it, making sure it's new, that I think builds trust and authority. It's more likely to cite something that's newer, and then include your brand name and author names within the content more than you have in the past. Um, I think that does help too. In the case that you get mentioned, it will pull in the brand name. So just some things there to consider when it comes to content and third party syndication. Um, yeah.
Oh my gosh, Kelly, I so love that. One of the things that that we see in aligning our affiliate programs to the overall GEO strategy is using the very prescriptive language and partnering with custom GPT affiliate partners, and we giving them exactly the language that we want to amplify and also the language in which we are missing in some of our content gaps that we want to show up for. So Really love that. And if you have partners and that you're already working with, or even partners you're not working with, like do not hesitate to reach out to update information because they if they're showing up for you, but their information is incorrect. I imagine in your world for APRs, and that's a big no-no. And so, you want to reach out and see if they'll update their information. It's just a great jumping off point for furthering that partnership and also hopefully securing additional content placements for additional LLM citations and brand mentions. Love that. Stephen, didn't want to leave you out here. So if there was anything that you wanted to add in any of those phases, would love to hear. Otherwise, we can definitely move on. Like I said, I've got a whole list of
Well, just
questions for you all.
real quick, like Austin's point about the query fan out, it gets back to the original thing. The big difference that you're not ranking one page for one query. You need chunks of text that satisfy and are relevant for those individual subqueries. So you can't have just one page that is going to rank for holiday watches. You need a section of a page that ranks for men's watches, a section for women's, a section for gifts, a section for cheap watches, all these like subqueries that make you more relevant and authoritative for the original query. So thinking about your content in kind of a more granular way.
Yeah, makes total sense. Oh my gosh, where's the time going? There's so much I want to cover. So let me see if I can cherry pick some of my questions here. What metrics should you track for GEO performance? Austin, I see you chomp in there.
Yeah, so I'll keep this one really short and simple since I have been a little bit longer on some of the other ones. But yeah, I think it's especially if you're starting out, it's fine to keep this really, really simple. And in fact, I think that's probably better.
Mhm.
You can, track citation count, mention count, for your selected prompts that you're tracking. I think that's, can be helpful. I think the most tangible one to track is a dedicated dashboard that shows month over month traffic from LLMs, which is, easier to do than it's been in the past. And then lastly, if particularly if you're in B2B or operating with more sophisticated sales cycles, using an open text field of just how did you hear about us can be really helpful. Because a lot of times people put strange things in there that are helpful, strange in a good way, that are very specific, and they'll either mention ChatGPT or throw their prompt in there or talk about Claude or what have you. So, if I had to pick three things, if you're going to start out with, just kind of your citation mention count, month over month traffic, and then, if anyone is willing to tell you specifically if that's how they found you.
And Kelly, would you agree? And all those are most common reports you can find in some of the tools that you had mentioned earlier.
Yeah, definitely. You'll see a handful of metrics, things like maybe share of voice or brand sentiment. But yeah,
Mm.
your mentions, your brand mentions, and your citations, which are two different things. Mentions are your brand getting mentioned. Citations is your data or content getting cited. And then yeah, traffic and conversions, like Austin said. I think starting there is going to do 99% of it at this day and age. And a lot of the data within these tools too are being, especially when it comes to like traffic count, keep in mind it's being estimated. Like they can't see that like we can with Google searches, and even then Google searches aren't exact either. So I'd agree with Austin 100% on that. And then the open field the customer survey, it's kind of funny, the more techie we get and the more complex our world gets, actually just asking people is sometimes the most valuable thing at the end of the day. So
Love it. So we've chatted about kind of starting with an audit, establishing your baseline, building out a phased approach to the four, components of a successful GEO strategy. Let's talk about building up what like a playbook that's repeatable. What do you guys think? Where do you guys think GEO should live in an organization?
I think
Which teams? Yeah, great.
I'm a big proponent of SEOs working collaboratively. Austin referenced a scenario, reaching out to somebody who might be writing an article and asking for a link inclusion, and Kelly referenced Reddit. Can you imagine the chaos if like some rogue SEO person reached out to a reporter without the brand or comms team knowing, or created a Reddit account that like just started spamming links and ruined a brand's like it's fraught with potential chaos if people that are kind of driving SEO and GEO are not working collaboratively, and you're not going to be set up for success. So I think I think SEO and GEO folks can drive it, but you really need collaboration with other stakeholders. YouTube, like SEOs are not going to be creating video content, right? For the most part. So how are you maintaining and growing a YouTube presence? There are so many examples of, ways that SEOs need to work together and can benefit, these other channels and kind of help them contribute more to the general GEO efforts. Someone who's done SEO or GEO can perhaps inform the way that a press release is structured to maximize exposure in LLMs. And that's, probably a concept that is difficult for most comms professionals to embrace, right? So it's building those cross-functional relationships, gaining that trust, and kind of like elevating the entire brand visibility and thinking about, kind of GEO as more than just referral traffic. I think those GA4 traffic dashboards are great. I have one, but that's a major difference. GEO is a kind of broader brand play than just search engine referral traffic and getting the buy-in of other teams to help everyone kind of contribute to the effort.
Oh my gosh, it's so you're basically saying it is a cross-functional, almost a GTM motion or an ecosystem-led growth motion in at the company. Would you say that's fair?
Yeah, I think, GEOs or SEOs are probably best positioned to drive that or get things moving. But I do think that it requires buy-in from a lot of other channels.
Love it. And Austin, we have a quick question from the audience. I want to make sure we get to this. What tools do you use for query fan out exercises, or is this a manual exercise?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, there's a script that you can bookmark when you're in like within ChatGPT specifically that will tell you the search model that they're using for like the actual search terms that they're using, and then also they'll provide all the URLs. I think it's the SEO Pub is the one that I'm using. I have no affiliation other than the fact that it's free and it works pretty well. So I'm sure there's lots of other methods and options out there, but that's the one I use.
That's great. That's a fantastic place to start. Free is always good. Going back to building out that GEO playbook, what are the specialties, like the specialists in the company that are needed to execute your playbook effectively?
I can,
Kelly, maybe you have some ideas.
yeah, I can talk to that. So I think it depends on the size of the company, kind of going back to where it lives. Smaller companies, startups, sometimes it's one or two, like 2 to 3 people, maybe if you include a consultant, but for sure, you'll need marketing, someone with the tech skills, whether that's engineer, dev, however that lives within your company, the content team, and then someone who manages affiliate channels. Sometimes at a startup, that is one person, right?
For
But
sure.
at much larger companies, that I work with that have 500,000 plus employees, there can be 20 people involved from the different departments to make sure these things are all rowing in the same direction. Just like Steven said, you don't want the SEO new hire to go put out a press release or something like that. That'd be awful. So, yeah, I think as your company scales, you'll have more people involved, but definitely, marketing, tech, content, syndication. Um, and I think at the end of the day, having buy-in from exec and management and people who control the budgets is really important too, to make sure that the program you're building is supported.
Yeah, it's such a good point with the projects that we do with Right Side Up. It depends on the company size, and we often will just start with a technical SEO GEO specialist first to like establish the baseline, and then somebody to Kelly's point, like on the content team can take those learnings and sort of be the lieutenant and start driving all the other folks in their areas of expertise. Or, later stage, they just have a GEO lead that then is cross-functional with the other teams. But I really appreciate your point on the company size because I feel like leaning in, get started wherever you can get started, and then go from there. What some of the questions I get often are like what low lift GEO actions could brands do immediately? I know Austin, you gave us some ideas before, building out a whole strategy. I'd love to hear from Kelly, like on the content side and syndication side, or Stephen, if you have anything to add there that folks in the audience could do this afternoon, along with their fan out. That Austin recommended.
Yeah, I get a real quick, almost checklist for content.
Cool.
If you don't have content like this already, think about blog articles or content that starts with how to, the best of, how do I. Stephen talked a lot about answering very specific questions and having, a much deeper base of content. So look at your content and ask yourselves, do we have that type of content? And then as you're creating your blogs moving forward, not every piece, but if you're trying to create something to rank for SEO and GEO, simple things at the top of every blog have a 5 key takeaways, bullet points. Make sure you're using hierarchical headings, H1s, H2. Use lists and table. Use original cited data, and use FAQs. If you do those, I think I said 5 things maybe. If you do those 5 things, I guarantee you it's going to increase the chance that it will be cited by an LLM.
Love that. And it looks like Jake has a fantastic question here. Could tools like ChatGPT's shopping feature make it harder to control GEO specific pricing or promotions? And Kelly, I'd love your perspective as, if you think about brands and controlling the content that is on site and off site, what do you think there?
Oh, that's a hard one.
I know.
The brands I work with too don't do as much e-commerce work too. I think the one thing you mentioned, like in finance world, APRs and rates, things like that nature, I do see that like daily that things are getting misquoted, miscited. So understanding how that data is going to be pulled in, which is also important to keep your content fresh too. If you have dated content or stale content, you're increasing your risk, and especially if you're in a regulated industry, the risk that that content is getting pushed out into the world by LLMs in an inaccurate way. So that's sort of my take on that. Yeah.
I totally agree. And with ChatGPT, and once they enable Shopify for instant checkout, I think it's really important to have your product feeds, content up to date. So they're pulling in the right prices. I think the promotion piece, Jake, that you talk about is really difficult, right? Especially within the affiliate world, there are coupon scrapers out there that are scraping coupons that are old, and your coupon strategy might be, there might be the general strategy and then the one-to-one strategy. And so I'm not sure how that's going to unfold. I do know that there are new companies that are set up for AI shopping feeds in particular that are coming out in anticipation of instant checkout and that collapsible funnel. Wish I had a better answer for you, Jake, but I'm hoping you'll come back and tell us all because we all want to know. Everything's changing so fast. I know we're coming down to, the last few minutes here. And so what I thought we could do if there were no more questions is like just a look ahead. Now, I know that's really tough with AI and GEO because everything is changing so quickly, but I'd love to hear from each of you. If you could predict one major change in GEO over the next year, what would it be? And I'm going to call on people. Austin.
Yeah, funny enough, I think that my answer to this it actually relates a little bit to Jake's question, which is I think we're going to get a lot more visibility, data, and tools as brands, as organizations that have an interest in appearing in AI search, also just using organizationally using AI search. I think that, ultimately, just from an economics perspective, every LLM chat product is going to have to be ad supported at some point. Again, that comes with a bunch of tools, that comes with a bunch of data and insights. So I think that for a year from now, that's where we'll be, is we'll have a lot more access to data and it'll be directly from the platforms as opposed to more of like the third-party tools, which I think will still have a place.
Sure.
But it's like I use SEMrush and Search Console,
Mhm.
and I think we'll get higher quality data directly from these platforms.
Love it. Kelly?
Yeah, I think related to what Austin said is monetization in general. We're going to see that
Yeah.
more and more with ads on these platforms. I think the one thing, so not related to that, to be different than what Austin said, would be I think brands, we have to have the structured data. We have to have articles that, can be crawled by LLMs, but becoming more original with your research, your point of view, those sort of things. I think we'll see that more and more with the savvy brands. Like I said, a lot of brands have gotten away with SEO by just cranking out mass-produced content. I don't think that's going to work. And the brands that realize that sooner than later will have more success. So I think sort of a major change in terms of brands thinking differently about content.
Love it. How about you, Stephen?
Yeah, I think just kind of like this coming together of brand and performance teams and kind of
Mhm.
like crossing that aisle more regularly and viewing GEO visibility as almost a brand play and pulling in the support that brand teams get that, an SEO team might not ordinarily get in order to make sure that brands are appearing when, where, and how brand teams want.
Oh my gosh, I love all your answers for so many reasons, and I could not agree more in terms of attribution changing to be both conversion and brand metrics. But I'm also going to throw a crazy one in. I think we will start to see kind of the cliff notes on brands' websites where you'll have a lot of the functionality within the AI tools on websites where you can start to interact in the website and get the information you need by starting with prompts, and then the website itself will be personalized to you. Because to me, AI is personalization at scale, and we are now marketing to a cohort of one. And so I think we'll get more sophisticated, and you will design your website. It will be dynamic to that cohort of one based on the prompts that they enter on your website. Food for thought. Anyways, thank you guys so much. I learned so much. I only got to about, 50% of my questions. So I hope we can do it again when in 2026 as more companies start to adopt GEO and you guys get more GEO learnings, and then we can help the audience in a 201. But if we didn't get to your question today, or you listened to the recording and you had a question, feel free to send it to us here at Right Side Up, growth@rightsideup.co, or amy@rightsideup.co, and we'll make sure that we can address it, and we'll contact Austin and Kelly and Stephen. And or you can reach out to any one of them on their LinkedIn pages. I'm sure I'm going to put words in your mouth, but I'm sure you'll answer their questions for you. So thank you guys so much. Super informative. Thank you for sharing your experience. And everyone, thanks for joining us. We be on the lookout for the recording. And again, if you have questions, please do not hesitate to contact us, even if it's a week out or a month out. Thank you all so much. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers. Bye-bye.